So this talk is all about opportunities for STEM graduates in the NHS with a particular focus on healthcare science and the scientist training programme. I'm going to start with an overview of healthcare sciences, and then I'm going to move on to give you more detail on the scientist training programme, because I guess that's why most of you are here today, because it's a very popular option for Manchester students and graduates. As part of the session this evening, I am delighted to say that we are joined by 3 Manchester graduates who are all currently STP trainees. And they've come along this evening to give you a bit of an insight into the STP in terms of what to expect, some suggestions and advice if you're thinking about making an application. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a good idea of what you need to do to make a good application, because there are things that you need to be doing over the next few months if you're planning to do that. I'll also show you where you can get further support. It's going to be quite bioscience focused in parts. I make no apology for that. This session was originally designed for bioscience students, but because we know it's popular to all students at university, we do open it out to everybody. So if you're here as a physicist or a chemist or an engineer, we'll do our best to deal with your questions as well. Just to do some introductions then, my name is Suzanne. I'm a careers consultant. My day job is working with students in the School of Biological Sciences and within the wider Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. And I'm also joined by my other colleagues. So Steph, do you want to just pop on and say hello?
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to see you all here. My name's Steph. I'm a careers advisor supporting Suzanne with helping the students of School of Biological Sciences and also the wider faculty as well.
Thanks, Steph. The other 3 people that I want to introduce you to are the STP trainees who have come to share their experience today. First of all, Vanyaa, would you like to just say hello?
Hi all, nice to see you all. I'm Vanyaa and I'm doing I'm working as a trainee clinical scientist with the Manchester University NHS lab, and I did my master's from the University of Manchester in Genomic Medicine.
Okay, thanks, Vanyaa. And we're also joined by Jazz. Okay, so the 3 trainees who joined us are all at work, I think, at the moment anyway. So Jazz will come and say hello shortly. And then also Georgia as well. Georgia's also joined us this evening. Would you like to say hello, Georgia?
Hi, yeah, I did my MSc in clinical biochemistry from Manchester, and I'm now a 3rd year trainee in clinical biochemistry in Glasgow.
Okay, thank you. Right, so let's crack on with the session and give you the information that you need. If you want to work in the NHS as a scientist, there are lots of ways into it. We have the NHS Scientist Training Programme, which is perhaps, obviously most popular with you as STEM students, which each year recruits between 300 and 400 graduates to be trained into different specialist areas, from medical physics through to genomics through to andrology. But there are also other ways that you can work in the NHS as a scientist as well. It's possible that you can work in different allied health and nursing profession roles. And if you've not done the relevant undergraduate degree, there are accelerated master's programmes that you can do which qualify you to practice in those allied areas. So by allied health, I'm talking about things like speech and language therapy, radiotherapy, dietetics, physiotherapy, and of course training as a graduate nurse as well. There are also options to become a NHS graduate manager. And within the NHS graduate management scheme, there are specialist areas, and that also includes health informatics. So if you do like your data, your bioinformatics, then that could be another option for you to consider as well. There's also roles in the NHS for graduates where you can train as a specialist within public health. And you don't need a medical degree to become a public health consultant. There is a pathway to do that. And we might have some public health students on the call this evening. But there's other ways as well that you can get into the NHS. Now, you sometimes see on the NHS job sites degree apprenticeships. So last year, for example, they were advertising a degree apprenticeship to work within radiotherapy. And so I saw this as a careers advisor and thought that's very interesting. And I contacted the recruiting manager to see, well, would you accept an application, say, from a biomedical scientist? And she said yes. So when you see degree apprenticeships, It's not necessarily aimed at people who maybe don't have an undergraduate degree already or maybe straight from school. This is another pathway into the NHS for you as a graduate as well. They don't come up all the time because they are funded by each individual health trust, but they can be a way into some of these professional areas. And if you are thinking about maybe retraining in an allied health professional area but are concerned about the costs, this could be an opportunity for you to look at as well. And then also, as well as recruiting graduates, like many organisations, the NHS recruits people on an ad hoc basis where they have a need within a department which graduates can apply for. Now, that also includes roles working as an MLA, a medical laboratory assistant, or a technician. And sometimes that can be a way to build experience in the NHS. And actually, if you do have a role as a technician within the NHS, you can apply for the STP as an internal in-service applicant as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can work in the NHS as a STEM graduate. I would suggest, if you're interested, to check out this website here, which is the Health Careers site. So this is the page for graduate training opportunities in the NHS. This explains all the different accelerated programmes, the different graduate training programmes, and also training within public health as well. Now, what you need to be aware of is that for some of these schemes, there might be nationality requirements in order to access training. So I would suggest that you look at the information very carefully to check that you're eligible before you go through the whole process of filling in countless application forms. But the NHS Careers website is really comprehensive and has lots of information that you need about all these different programmes. Okay, so there are two main groups of healthcare scientists in the NHS. We have the biomedical scientists and we have the clinical scientists, and those are two distinct groups within the healthcare science service. Biomedical scientists and biomedical scientists are described with capital B and capital S because this is a protected job title. In order to work as a biomedical scientist in the NHS, it's important that you have a degree that's accredited by the Institute of Biomedical Science. And that's needed for registration with the Health and Care Professions Council. And like other organisations, probably other countries, to work in health, it is a registered profession because, of course, we have to protect the general public. And it's important that you do the right training registrations in order to be allowed to practice. So, as you will probably know, if you are a Manchester student, our biomedical science degrees are not accredited by the Institute of Biomedical Science. That's not because they're rubbish, because they're not, but it's because they don't teach the exact syllabus required for accreditation. It is possible for Manchester graduates to register as biomedical scientists, but there's some things that you have to go through in order to do that. The first thing you have to do is to have your degree assessed by the Institute of Biomedical Science, so they compare your modules to the ones on their list. There is a cost associated with that. At the moment, it's about £300. And depending on the result of that assessment, you either will be accredited, that's probably quite unlikely. The most likely option is that you might have to complete top-up modules. So basically what you do after you've had your degree checked is that you will register with the university, which is accredited for top-up modules, and you'll just do some individual modules with that uni in order to meet the requirements for accreditation. The nuclear option, if you are a long way away from this or maybe retraining, is that MMU, Manchester Metropolitan University, they have a full conversion master's degree. It's the only master's degree that's accredited for conversion. And if you do that course, then you are eligible to apply for grade 5 biomedical science trainee positions within the NHS. So biomedical scientists typically enter at grade 5. So the biomedical scientists is the biggest group. The other group is the clinical scientists, and they're a smaller group within the NHS. And the biomedical scientists do a lot of the testing, and the biomedical scientists are also managers within the NHS as well. They manage haematology labs, pathology services. The clinical scientists get more involved with clinical decisions. So this is the NHS's primary graduate entry route into healthcare science. You can apply as a direct entry, so an external applicant. That's what most of you will be doing, but you can also apply internally as well. So the biomedical science pathway, you have to have an accredited degree. With clinical science, it's a lot more open in terms of its requirements. An accredited degree is not required. What they do require, though, is that you've got a good degree, usually a 2-1, or if you've got a 2-2, that you've got a master's. And there are not as many opportunities for the scheme as well. Last year, there was maybe about 400 posts across the UK. This is the competition information for the STP programme in 2023. So they got 5,500 applications across 30 specialisms. And for some specialisms, there are a number of places. For other specialisms, there might only be 1 or 2. So STP trainees enter at grade 6. They make up only 5% of the NHS workforce within, but they also are involved in 80% of all clinical decisions. So with some of the posts, you might get patient contact. You'll certainly get to talk to clinical staff. So that's the distinction there. So with biomedical science, what you need to remember is, if you studied at Manchester, there are steps you need to take in order to become accredited. For clinical science, you're fine to go ahead and make an application. So I'm just going to show you the accreditation page on the IBMS website. This is the page for non-accredited degree assessment, and on here it tells you the 2 forms you have to complete and the process in order to have your degree assessed, and it also explains there about top-up modules and where you can do it. Because MMU offers the full conversion masters, they also offer the top-up modules as well. So let's move on. So if you maybe came to Manchester to do your masters, maybe you already practiced as a hospital scientist, maybe overseas for a number of years before you came to do your master's course, there are different routes to health and care profession council registration as a clinical or biomedical scientist. And these are the links that you need to know. So if you are interested in clinical science and you have experience, there is a international route which will allow you to be registered to practice in the UK. But there's other kind of options as well. There's a pathway through the Association of Clinical Scientists. So if you have typically more than 4 years experience in a relevant field and can demonstrate competence, then that could be a pathway to registration. And there's also certificates of equivalence. Now, these are quite complicated processes, and if this is something appropriate to you, I suggest you look at these websites and digest them and think about what action you need to take. If you are thinking about biomedical science and maybe qualified or studied elsewhere, then the IBMS have a certificate of competence by equivalence, which you can go through as well. And this is similar for lots of different healthcare pathways if you may be trained overseas but want to practice in the UK. So the Health and Care Professions Council is probably a great place to start, but then looking at these relevant professional bodies will also clarify the pathway that you need to take. So what we're going to do now is introduce to you our graduates who are current STP trainees, so you can hear a bit more about the pathway they took to get to where they are now. So first of all, I'm going to ask Jazz to switch on her camera and to tell you a little bit about what she did.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hopefully you can hear me now. Sorry about earlier, my mic wasn't working. So I thought I'd just talk through my STP journey and how I got to start or get onto the STP. So initially I came across genomic counselling. So because I didn't introduce myself earlier, I'm based in Cambridge and I've just started the STP in genomic counselling. So I came across genomic counselling when I was researching into careers before university. And I wanted a career that incorporated my passion for genetics, but also a role that would be patient-facing. So I came across genomic counselling, and throughout university, through sessions like this, I was able to kind of gain more of an insight into what genomic counselling involves. So I then went to study biology at the University of Manchester, and I still kind of went into that degree kind of open-minded into the different types of careers that I could go on to after biology. But like I said, throughout that degree, I try to kind of gain a further insight into genomic counselling. So I think the Great Ormond Street Hospital, they host an annual kind of session into what the role involves, and an opportunity to ask any questions. So I really tried to understand the role of genomic counselling before applying for the STP. So in my final year of biology, I decided to apply for the STP. I wasn't successful at that point. So because you apply for the STP every year, I then worked on gaining experience. With the STP, it's important through the application, it's important to demonstrate your NHS values, and how you demonstrate that in day-to-day life, but also in volunteering and in any role that you kind of go on to have. And in specific to genomic counselling, I think it was emphasised the importance of showing that you've gained experience in a caring role and that you've worked with vulnerable individuals. So that's when I went on to volunteering with certain charities. And after I graduated, I worked with individuals with learning disabilities, where I really got to appreciate the impact certain conditions or, for example, genetic conditions can have on individuals as well as their families. So after during this period, I applied for the Cardiff Masters, which is another route into genomic counselling, as well as the STP. And again, I wasn't successful in that year. So again, I tried to figure out what other experience I can gain. And in that year, the NHS had introduced quite a relatively new role, which goes by many names. So genomic associate or genomic practitioner is what it's kind of known as. And this role was created to give people an opportunity to gain experience within a clinical genetic setting, for people that are interested in genomic counselling. So that's when I moved to Cambridge and started this role as a genomic practitioner. And then after a year within this role of shadowing genetic counsellors and helping with whole genome sequencing consenting, I knew that it was something that I would definitely see myself doing in the future. And so then I applied for the internal STP at Cambridge, and I was successful after many attempts. But I think this journey, it's important to say that every person's journey is different for the STP. Some people go straight into the STP after graduating, others worked many years in the NHS before changing careers. Some people do PhDs first. So each journey is completely individual, and this is just my journey to the STP. And yeah, I think it's important, if it's something that you really want to do and you're passionate about, then it's important to be persistent and resilient to kind of get to that point.
Okay, that was really helpful. Thank you so much for that, Jazz. And this is something that you'll see if you look at people who are on the STP program, is that you sometimes get people who get straight on to the STP, but you also get other people who make reapplications as well. The NHS know what they're looking for, and so I would always encourage you to apply. But the more you can do to understand the role, the higher chances are going to be of being successful. So let's give you an opportunity to meet another one of our graduates. So Vanyaa, would you like to tell the students about yourself?
Hi all, so I'm Vanyaa. Like I said, I'm doing the Genomics STP at Manchester NHS Foundation. Just to give a little bit background about my journey, I did my undergraduate in India, and then I moved to the UK to do my master's from the University of Manchester in genomic medicine. So I did have a good idea that I want to go ahead and do something in genomics, but I was quite lost as to what. And that's when I came across the STP. So I did apply the first year, like when I was doing my master's, but I was unsuccessful this year, maybe because I didn't go as prepared or I didn't have enough help around it. But I think since you guys are here, so you're already one step ahead, so congratulations on that. I think I'm going to start off by saying a little bit about the STP, so I think you must be aware it's a 3-year course where you split between work and university. The work bit includes a lot of training activities where you reflect on different activities that the National School of Healthcare Science expects you to do, and you end up building a portfolio for your HCPC registration. So in the start, it might be a bit slow, but it can get hard juggling between university and work as well. So you must be able to handle multiple different tasks at a single time as an STP. So if you want to research a bit about your specialism, I think a good place to start off is A Day in the Life of a Clinical Scientist. So for genomics, a great resource for anyone who's interested in genomics, counseling, or cancer genomics or bioinformatics would be the Genomics Education Program. It's a website that's accessible online, and you can see the different roles of a clinical scientist, what genomics is, and start educating yourself a bit more about the specialism that you want to apply to. And another great starting off point would be once you've cut down on shortlisted a few specialisms, start searching names on LinkedIn with just trainee clinical scientist with the specialism that you're interested in, and just send out as many request connections as you do. I've already seen a few connections on LinkedIn, so good job with that as well. And once you start connecting with them, it's just a very cold, open message saying that give a little bit background about yourself and say that I'd love to know more about your training program, or I'd love to ask a few questions about the application process. And I'm sure multiple different people will be ready to help. That's what I did when I was applying. I think I messaged at least 15 to 20 different people, and at least 10 of them replied. So the community is quite helpful. So don't be afraid to send a simple message. This can really go a long way. Yeah, and then another great web resource I'd say is the National School of Healthcare Science website itself. The website contains all the information you could possibly have. It gives an idea about the different routes that you can take, what are the different specialisms, and the most important resource I'd say in there is the person specification for the STP. This person specification tells you exactly what the school is looking for. It has, I think it's a 5-page document that has all the different qualities that they are looking for in an STP. And while you're building your personal statement for the STP, it's always a good place to look at and see that you're gaining the relevant experience that is required in the person specification. So when I wasn't successful the first time, I took this time in between to work on my personal statement by making sure that I've gained all the relevant experience that they require for me. So it's more like just like a checkbox for them, and they're reading my application that yes, this applicant has done all of this. And it really helps while shortlisting your application as well. So just have a play around the National School of Healthcare Science website, and I'll give you loads of resources about that. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention was different laboratory open days. They are a good place to actually talk to people who are already working there. You can find more information just by connecting with someone who's already working in the lab that you're interested in. I can give you one to start off with. So the Northwest Genomic Laboratory Hub where I'm working, we have a virtual open day on the 24th of January. So if anyone's interested, you can drop me a message and I can send you the link to register for that as well. So you get a chance to see how the lab works and talk to different trainees, ask any questions you have. That would be great. And yeah, good luck with your applications. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any more questions about what I've spoken or anything about my specialism as well. I'll be happy to help.
Okay, that was really helpful. Thank you, Vanyaa. And we'll cover some of the suggestions that Vanyaa made as well in the next few slides as well, just to kind of get that message home. But it does make such a big difference to your application. You understand what the job's about. So taking the time to reach out to Manchester graduates is a really helpful way to kind of get that insight you need to make a strong application. So finally, Georgia, would you like to come onto camera and tell us a little bit about your STP experience?
Yes, hiya. Sorry about the NHS lighting. Like Jess, I actually knew that I wanted to do clinical science before my undergraduate, but I didn't know quite which field I wanted to do it in. So my BSc was at York, and that was in biomedical sciences. And during that time, I got involved in lots of different things. I did an internship in an academic lab, and that kind of made me fall in love with the laboratory aspect, but I knew I wanted to be closer to patient care and having that sort of direct impact on patient care on the day rather than years down the line. So I had attended these careers days, and I'd actually originally, because of my academic background, had thought that I was going to be applying to the immunology. So I applied to Manchester to do my MSc in immunology. But actually during this time, I had gone to a lab. I'd visited an immunology lab and a biochemistry lab, and actually found that sort of the job role that I wanted was more aligned with biochemistry, and actually then had to email Manchester and say, please, can you take me onto the biochemistry? So I did the 1-year MSc clinical biochemistry that is actually delivered as part of the SDP, which obviously gave me a really good understanding of the role and the technical knowledge that's associated with it. I then applied at the end of that for the English and the Scottish schemes. Unfortunately, I didn't get an interview the first year in England, but I did get one in Scotland, and they gave me some really helpful feedback, advised me to go and work in a high throughput lab, which I was able to do. So I went and worked in a private clinical laboratory called Randox Laboratories, first in COVID because it was during those times, and then transitioned across into their clinical laboratory side. Then I made my second application, both to England and Scotland again, and was lucky to be successful in both, which I didn't think was going to happen. So then had to make the awful decision of where I wanted to go. Yes, so that was a couple of years ago, and since then I've been lucky enough to work across a wide variety of specialties. And I would just advise, if you are able to be mobile, I did have to make the decision based on talking to people in different. So even after you've made that final hurdle, it's really important to talk to the people in the labs that you're going to be, or labs, or whatever position you're going to be working in, and really choose what works for you, whether that's location or the type of learning that you want to receive.
Okay, that was fabulous. Thank you. And something that Georgia said there is she was advised to get high volume work experience. And again, that's something which in all the time of supporting people in applications to the STP, that's one of the things that often makes people more successful, because you are going to be working in a very high volume lab. And if you've got that work experience outside of your degree course, it shows that you're able to manage working professionally in that environment. If you think about it, if you're at uni and your lab doesn't work, well, you just write up your notes differently. If you're in a professional situation, it needs to work every time. And also because you might be running some tests which are then picked up by your colleague, when they come on for their shift as well. So if you have got that external experience, it makes a big difference to your application. Okay, so what I'm going to ask Jazz and Vanyaa to do now is, as we go through the rest of the slides, is chip in if there's anything they wanted to kind of stress. So I'm going to now just summarise the things that they've said, just to help you to make a strong application. In terms of the specialisms, now all three of them mentioned the importance of having a look at the National School of Healthcare Science website. That is your primary source of information for the STP programme in England. Now, the programmes in Scotland and Wales don't have as much information on their website, but a lot of the stuff which is on the England site is equally applicable to those regional programmes as well. So in the STP in England, these are the specialisms that they recruit for, and they fall into three categories: life sciences, physical sciences, physiological sciences. And actually a new physiological sciences that's now become available is neurophysiology in intraoperative neuromonitoring. That's quite a mouthful to get yourself around on a Tuesday evening. Now, the thing to know is that not every scheme runs every year, so we won't know what they're recruiting until they open for applications. And for some of these programmes, they might only have a couple of places. For others, they'll have a lot. So medical physics, clinical biochemistry tend to have a lot more places than andrology, where there will be very few. And a message really about this whole process is that the information comes out from the NHS, often at short notice and without warning. So if you've had a look at this website already, you'll know that there's not much information on there. I've had a good look through it to see if any pages have been updated yet for this year. Not many have, but when it goes live, it'll go live very quickly. So it's good to monitor that page now that you know that you want to make an application. And something else picking up on what our current STPs have said is it's likely that you might not get on the first time you apply, but please be encouraged to reapply. It's not one of those programs where you can apply once and that's it. So you might apply after your undergraduate degree, you might apply after your master's degree. If you are thinking about doing a master's degree, you might apply for your master's degree and apply for the STP to give yourself another chance of getting onto it. So bear that in mind if you're making an application. So these are the subjects. That QR there will take you through to the very detailed information about each specialism as well. So how can you find out more information about these specialisms? So Jazz, Georgia and Vanyaa have already given you lots of ideas how you can do that. The Health Careers website, the main NHS Careers website, has got a section where you can explore different types of roles, and that includes other roles within the NHS which are going to be appropriate to sciences, so healthcare science, health informatics, and again some of those allied health professions as well. And there's also the Prospects website, which has quite detailed job profiles on there for all these different individual specialisms. What you'll find on the Prospects website though is more information on your progression within that post as well, about where you might be working, and again some advice on making an application. A really good source of information are the professional body websites. Now, Vanyaa mentioned the Genomic Education Programme as being a really good source of information for genomics roles, but you'll find that each professional area has its own professional body, and often on those websites you'll find similar resources as well. So if you're interested in physics and clinical engineering, then you need to get yourself onto the IBMS website. For biochemistry, immunology and microbiology, there is the labmed.org site. If you are an aspiring audiologist, then there's the British Academy of Audiology website. So again, those are really good sources of information. And if you're not interested in any of those three, then the HCPC very usefully have a whole list on their website of all the professional bodies they work with for accreditation for clinical scientist roles. So you're bound to find on there your appropriate professional body. But what has also been mentioned as well is, you know, from the three people who are here today, that there are plenty of other Manchester graduates who've gone onto this programme. And if you look on LinkedIn, you can find them. And if nothing else, you can learn from their profiles the steps that they took and the experience they got in order to be successful on the programme. So that's another good resource that you can use. So just before we move on, Vanyaa, Jazz, Georgia, any other particular website you might want to add to this list as being particularly useful to find out about the specialisms?
Just to kind of echo what you said about LinkedIn, I found that really useful as well, in terms of talking to other STP students who were successful, about the kind of experience that they obtained and what they did to really strengthen their application. And like I'd mentioned before, and like Vanyaa had mentioned, a lot of these specialties would do open days. So just keep an eye out for those. LinkedIn, again, is a really good place to look at if there are any open days for the specialty that you're interested in. Like I mentioned, GOSH, they do an open day for genetic counselling. And it's also a good thing to then include in your application that you've really researched into that specialty and you understand what that entails.
That's really helpful. Some specialisms are easier to get experience in than others. You might find it quite hard to get experience in andrology. But if you've spoken to somebody who's a clinical scientist or a trainee in that area, what you can hear from them is an insight into the role, which you can then reflect upon to think about, what have I done? What do I know that's relevant to that area? Because in the application, they want to see you have an understanding about what that role is about, what techniques they're using, who you're going to be supporting. And if you've done as much as is possible to find out about that, that will be recognised. It's really hard to get experience in some areas, but if they can see that you've shown that curiosity and are able to regurgitate that in your application, that will make you stand out. Okay, so the programme itself, just to reiterate what Vanyaa shared before, is a 3-year programme. It's a fixed-term programme of workplace-based training, but alongside that, you're going to have to do an awful lot of study. So when we've spoken to trainees in the past, they will reiterate that it can be pretty intensive. And also bear in mind that as part of your training, you might have to go to other hospital sites. That's expected within the programme, that you might have to have a degree of mobility for certain parts of your training. So it's all coordinated by the National School of Healthcare Science, and they support nearly 900 trainees over 500 departments. So it's a big scheme that they support. Now, there are regional organisations that help to deliver the STP as well, and our local one is the Manchester Academy for Healthcare Science Education. And there's a link in the slides there so you can have a look at the information that they have on their website. We're still waiting to hear whether they're going to be able to offer an open day this season or not, so look out for that. But as well as Mays offering the STP delivery, there are other universities that offer it as well. There's Aston, King's College, Newcastle, Queen Mary London and Liverpool as well. So that gives you an insight into what the pathway will be for you when you're on the programme. So these are the specialties that are offered within Mays. And something that Georgia mentioned was it's important to think about what's important for you. And what you need to do is to be driven by the specialism, not the location. Because once you start thinking, I only want to work in a certain area, it's going to really restrict your chances. And what the NHS wants are people who are passionate about their specialism. If you're desperate to stay within Manchester, it might be that what you want to do isn't offered within that programme. So you need to really do your research. So what do you do if you want to make a good application? What's necessary? So we've already said you need to be a high achieving graduate. So a 2-1 at undergraduate level or 2-1 and a relevant master's or a PhD. And also this is a scheme which, you know, you might apply for straight out of uni, but I've also worked with alumni who've graduated a long time ago who, after several years in industry, have decided to move into the NHS. You have to be able to demonstrate that passion, genuine passion for science and technology and how it can be applied and leveraged to improve patients' outcomes. About applying that knowledge to patients is important. As part of this process, you're going to have to read the NHS Constitution and be able to show how you can match those values. And also it's about improvements and changes and innovation. You know, that's really important. It's people who are going to go in there and make a difference. Some of these roles will interface with patients directly. If you're going to be an audiologist, you're going to spend most of your working life working with older people and with children and babies. But others, there might be opportunities to do research as well and be involved with education and training. And that's why it's good to talk to current trainees and current clinical scientists to really understand the environment in which you're going to be working. So our panel, what do you think is really important? You know, thinking about who you work with and your boss, what do you think is important to make a good clinical scientist?
Particularly for my profession, I think the emphasis really is on that lifelong learning. That's something that really attracted me to the role, but can be very challenging sometimes. So being able to direct your own learning.
One thing I've learned with starting the STP, how important it is to, especially in the NHS, guidelines are always changing, there's always new developments. With genomics, it changes quite rapidly. So being able to, having that passion for your specialty, to want to learn and keep up to date with all these changes that will impact patient care and how you deliver that care, keep up with that professional development.
Thank you, Jazz. If you're going to make an application in England, when it opens for applications, it will do so without much warning. It will just go live on its website. Last year, it opened in February, but in previous years, it's been slap bang in the middle of exams in January. One year, it suddenly went live before Christmas. I'm guessing because we know that there's a Genomics open date in January, that it might be late January, early February this year. That's where my money is. When they score your applications in the past, they sometimes given extra points when they've scored your initial application if you have a higher degree, a master's or a PhD. When they are scoring in the past, they've not counted an MSci as being equivalent to a master's, which is quite frustrating, isn't it, really? But it's mostly because you're doing 9 months at that level, not 12. And I suppose because they get so many applications, they can be picky. As we said, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland all recruit separately from England. So the process, it does change slightly each year, but for the last few years, it's been quite consistent. So they tend to give you a 2-week application window. You apply through a system called Oriel. And as part of your application, you submit a essay question, a personal statement, which for the last few years has been around 1,000 words in length, and they'll give you details of what you need to do to answer. And a lot of it is about your motivation, your understanding, and your fit for the role. After you've submitted your application, and I guess this will happen again this year, you have to sit a situational judgment test. Now, I don't know if you know what those are. If you don't, you need to find out about them. It's the kind of test where they give you a situation and you're asked to say what you would do. So in order to answer that, you need to understand what the role is about. What would a STP trainee do? What should they do? Thinking about that detailed job description, which our panel have directed you towards. And you have a 2-day window in which to do that. Now, so that SJT is used to do the long listing, and then long-listed candidates will choose their preferred location, and then shortlisting is done by clinical scientists. So the people who are ultimately looking at your application are the people you're going to be working for. So what's happened for the last number of years is that you'll be invited to an interview by the employment department. And what's happened in the last few years is that that interview will be your only interview for the STP that year. So that's what's happened for the last few years since COVID. So again, we'll wait to see once the competition opens this year, whether they're still going to run with that. So bear in mind, this is what could happen this year as well. So tips for a good application. Again, as I've said, look at this website. Hopefully the one message you take away is have a look at the National School of Healthcare Science website. It's really important in your application, you reference NHS values and behaviours, focus on the patient. You need to understand where clinical scientists and the role you're applying for fits into the healthcare system. And you can get a lot of insight from that by talking to people who work within the NHS. Once it opens for applications, they do a webinar for applicants. That's done by the STP recruiters. So look out for that. On the National School of Healthcare Science website is a list of open days. Have a look and see when they are. And in fact, what I'm going to do is just hop onto that website now and show you where to find them, because it's not immediately obvious where to find them. So when you go onto the website, you've got all the information about the programme, but you need to go to the top bar here. Here you can filter it by STP open days, and it tells you when they are. Now, since I started prepping this talk over the weekend, an extra 4 open days have been uploaded to this site. So some of them will be done in person, a lot of them will be done virtually as well. So check that out in case the specialism or the hospital that you're interested in training in has an open day, because that could be a good opportunity to get insight and hear from some practicing scientists as well. So if you can, go along to one, talk to our students and start to prepare for these SJTs. If you've not done one before, they are a little bit mind-boggling, but with practice, you can understand what you need to do. And our website has really good information there on how you can start to prepare for this kind of test. Our panellists tonight have already shared a couple of helpful ones to check out, like the Genomic Education Programme site. These are some other ones to look at. It's not Twitter anymore, it's X, isn't it? But the National School of Healthcare Science have an X account, and current trainees often post on there, so that's definitely worth checking out. There is a blog that's been going for a couple of years now, the STP Perspective blog. So have a good look on that online, because these sites exist from people who are on the programme who want to share their experiences. And again, anything you can do to get insight is going to be really important to you making a strong application, but also deciding, is it for you? You know, each year we see graduates who are on the programme who decide when they're on it, it's not quite what they want. So do that research before you start so you can make good decisions. And the important message for tonight really is, it is really competitive. I would always encourage you to apply, but have a plan B. What are you going to do if you're not successful this year? So it might be that you apply after a master's. It might be you go on to do a PhD and apply again. And for some programmes, having a PhD can, really help your application. It might be that you decide to reapply after getting relevant practical laboratory experience. So Georgia talked about how she got experience at Randox to improve her experience in working in a high volume setting. You might consider working your way up. So Jazz got that role as a genomic practitioner and was able to apply as an internal candidate for the STP. Anything which will increase your NHS experience, your patient experience, your technical experience. And lots of diagnostic testing in the NHS is done outside and outsourced to different labs. Organisations like SynLab, Sodexo, Biopath all do testing for the NHS. And I know graduates in the past who've worked there and use that as a way of building up experience to then apply for the STP. You might be able to get experience in the private sector. I've certainly seen profiles of our graduates who have got experience in private settings. I saw one graduate, for example, who worked as a trainee embryologist in a private company, and then after a couple of years applied for the STP, or working within private imaging, for example, to get experience if you're interested in neurophysiology. That can sometimes be a good pathway to build that experience. Or even working for an NHS supplier, and that link takes you to the NHS suppliers database. You know, think about all the test kits, all the kind of peripheral services around the edges, the places where you can start to build that experience and make yourself competitive for the NHS. Whatever you do, it's important to get some NHS experience because it allows you to really think about what the purpose of your role is and how your role is going to make a difference to patients. And that might be through volunteering or for other kinds of work. And think about how you might acquire relevant skills. So that might be, if you're interested in genomic counselling, by maybe doing some counselling qualification at your local college. If you're interested in some of the computational opportunities, maybe improving your programming skills, that could be really important. But also thinking about what else you could do if you don't get on, because you might reapply, or you might decide actually there's something else which gives you the same kind of motivation as to apply for the NHS. So I've got a summary here of useful resources, which you'll get when you get the slides, just to reiterate the ones you'll find helpful. I also wanted to highlight here as well, there is a site called Pearson VUE. So they're the company who administer the SJT you have to do for the STP, but there's some practice questions on there as well. So if you want to get an insight into what you might be asked, that's a great site to look at. You have got support from us, your careers service. We work in faculty teams and we're here to support you. So if you are looking to find ways of getting experience, if you're looking for feedback on applications, we're the people who can help you. So bear us in mind if you have any questions after tonight. So thank you for listening. I'm just going to stop the slides now and we'll just see where we are with the questions.
I think you kind of have covered this over the course of the slides, but quite a few people wanted to know kind of how likely is it to get onto the programme as a final year undergraduate student, as most people they've seen have done a master's degree who've got onto the STP.
Each year, a couple do. I remember a couple of years ago, there were a couple of students who got onto for bioinformatics. Both of them were bioscience students who did a bioinformatics final year project and both got shortlisted for the STP. So it is possible. They know what they're looking for. And if they see that in your application, you will get through. Having experience, having a master's degree, all that helps because it helps you to make a better application. But ultimately, they know what they're looking for. You've got nothing to lose to apply for it this year in your final year. At worst, you won't get on. They don't charge you for applying as well, and you can reapply in the future as well. So if you are thinking, do you know what? I think I know enough to make an application, you've got nothing to lose. But think about what you can do to get that competitive edge, because it is a competitive programme. Most graduates do get on it, but not all the time.
Yeah, great. The second kind of most popular question, and there was a few about this, was about international students, which I know you kind of mentioned, but yeah, do the NHS sponsor international students? And that's also somebody asked about what kind of visa, would it be a skilled worker visa or student visa, that kind of thing.
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, in the past, unless they changed their mind this year, they do sponsor. I think Vanyaa wants to come in here as well.
Yeah, I think that's quite relevant to me. So
yeah,
I was obviously an international student. So yeah, the STP does happily sponsor. That shouldn't stop you from applying, and it's the healthcare worker visa that you get. So that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Absolutely, and I've supported master's students. There was an Iranian student who got onto genomics bioinformatics program a couple of years ago, and if you are successful, you'll be sponsored under a skilled worker visa. This isn't a scheme which is appropriate for the graduate visa because of the nature of the scheme. If they feel that you are a strong fit and a good candidate, they will sponsor you for a skilled worker visa. So yes, if you're international, you can apply, but remember, it's really competitive.
You know, is there any way to gain experience in an internship or volunteering within the NHS to improve applications? And I think you did kind of cover that, but have you got any other kind of advice
I think
to how best to get into, get some experience in the NHS?
I think if you've got a chance to get experience on your programme, then go for it. So if you're a biological scientist, please do a lab-based final year project if you want to do a lab-based STP, because otherwise you're missing out on that experience. I know students in the past who what they've done is they've approached NHS labs direct to see if it's a possibility to talk to somebody to get some work experience. That's always one of my top tips, to get the names of the right people. If, say, for example, you're interested in, I don't know, medical physics or something, look on the NHS jobs website for medical physics, and it doesn't matter what level of job, just find a job for medical physics, because invariably on that website there'll be information that says more information about this post, and there'll be a name and an email, and 9 times out of 10 that's the head of department, the senior clinical scientist. That's the person who, if you go on the STP, will be your manager. That's a person who can say yes or no to getting work experience, but that's a person who can also give you insight into the role as well. So as well as LinkedIn, that's the way to find details of the people who might be able to say if it's possible to get work experience. It depends on the lab. There's certain labs you're never going to get experience in because of the nature of what they do. You're more likely to get experience in high volume labs, biochem, hematology, pathology. Those are the places. But as I said, if you can't get the experience, show you've done your research, because that makes such a big difference as well. And it will help you with the interviews, because the interviews will ask you very specific, tricky technical questions. There'll be no general questions at that stage. They'll want to know what techniques are used in that specialism.
So next one, how specific does your degree have to be to the specialism that you apply for?
That's a good question. I remember a few years ago talking to somebody who worked in histocompatibility and immunogenetics at H&I, transplantation science, and she was saying that some of the things they do within the lab are you may never do on your degree course, no matter what you do. So some of them, there is flexibility. As I said, it's not as specific as becoming a biomedical scientist, but if you can show in your programme relevant skills, so like for H&I, do a lot of flow cytometry. If you've done a bit of that, that's great to mention for H&I. If they can see that there's overlap and trainability and you've done your research, then there will be some flexibility for some of them. But use your common sense when you look at them. If you're a biological scientist, you're probably not going to become a medical physicist without a bit more of an extra degree.
Yeah, and that's probably the kind of thing, if you attend the open days, that's the kind of questions that you can ask of the people that are hiring and working there. What kind of degrees and backgrounds people got and what they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
What do we recommend as a first year student that they should be doing? So it looks like there's a fair few first year students on the call.
That's fantastic to hear.
Getting very prepared.
Start early. Okay, if you're a first year student, think about how you can build experience and knowledge. Talk to people. Between second and final year, or if you're an MSci student, between the two pre-final years that you've got, for goodness sake, try and get some work experience. Try and get some experience in a lab outside the university, because the laboratory-based disciplines, that makes a big difference. Try and get some NHS experience. That could be through volunteer. As the first year, have a look at the volunteering website of the university. So that's manchester.ac.uk/volunteers, and look for opportunities to do some healthcare volunteering and see, how it fits for you. You might find a different vocation from doing that, because again, that will help you to deal with the values assessment that's part of any NHS application. Think about module choices. Can you maybe choose essays or projects and modules which align more with your discipline area? If you're going to be doing a placement year, there are NHS labs who have placement students each year. The transplantation lab at Manchester Royal Infirmary hosts a placement student. Other hospitals do the similar thing. So start to think about how you can engineer that experience, because even if you do it and at the end decide, well, maybe it's not for me, you'll still have a fantastic CV. So you can't lose by doing it and getting that experience. It's very, very transferable.
And somebody's mentioned there in the chat that at Leanne, that she did her work experience, transplant lab last year. It was really amazing. So.
Absolutely, that's the place. And talk to people who, if you find someone who works in those labs, having a chat to them about it. It's getting that insight. What's it like to do on a daily basis? Is it going to intrigue? Is it going to drive you around the bend? It's good to know before you find yourself there. You want to do that research, because that allows you to make an authentic application. And one final word of warning. The NHS comes down hard on anybody who they suspect has been using AI to put together their applications. So don't even think about it. You might use it when you're doing your rough drafts to get some ideas, but your statement needs to sound like you. And when you spend all your life looking at applications, you can spot a ChatGPT application a mile off. You want to get the job because it suits you. It's your voice talking about what it is that you want to do. So be sensible when you put your applications in. Don't get kicked out by doing something a little bit silly. You can get support for your applications from us, so use us to help to kind of humanise your application and use your voice. That's what they want to hear. And when you get that authentic enthusiasm coming across, it has such a big impact when you're recruiting.